Hi, good evening. My name is Jay Rothman, and welcome to Real Men, Real Talk Live. Hi, good evening. My name is Jay Rothman. Once again, I'd like to introduce my co-host. We have Josh Ritcher coming in from somewhere in the Americas, South, North America, that is. We have Evis Heath, the man of the land from down under. He calls Australia home. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Course, we have Mr. Jeff Fasano back in Nashville, Tennessee. Welcome to the show, guys. I cannot believe one more week has passed. We are now... January is behind us. We are right in the beginning of February 5th. Is that not unbelievable? What's happening?
Christmas is right. We're gonna have to do our holiday show soon.
Right. Well, you guys are all looking good. We got the white up and down on the left, on my left side, and we have the darker colors on the right side. It wasn't planned that way. But I hope you guys had an amazing week and your health is strong and you have good energy and you did some self-care this week. I'd like to take a moment before we jump into the show topic tonight to welcome our viewers and our listeners. If you should hear something that you like or love with love, please tap your love button on your monitor. And if you should have any questions or comments for us, please share with us, because this is not a monologue. This is a dialogue, an interactive show. We enjoy interacting with all of you viewers. So please light us up so that we can levitate and elevate. Also, let us know what city, state, and or country you call home today, so that if you are new to the show, we can welcome you. Tonight's topic is one that I have been chewing at the bit for some time now. Every time we're in production meeting on Tuesdays, I say, what about boundaries? And we always seem to have come up with another topic that seemed much more pressing in the moment. But I love the topic of boundaries, because the topic of boundaries is really all about the power of saying no. And so really, what are boundaries about? There's a lot to it. Many of us, speaking for myself, really avoided setting boundaries in my adult life. I was fearful of it. I was uncomfortable with it. We'll probably dive into that a little bit, but what I'd like to do is invite Jeff Fasano to open us up tonight. Warm us up and kick us off on the power of no. What does that mean?
And Jeff, you can say no.
Really? No. No, Jay, I'm not kidding. I'm not starting this off. I'm passing to Josh. All right. That's what no means, actually. That's what no means. I had to learn how to say no. And this probably would have been a great subject to dovetail off of the people pleasing, because really boundaries are about boundaries are really a reflection of how deeply we love, honor, and value ourselves, and want to contain our own energy in our life. And sometimes we give ourselves away, and we don't have any boundaries. I had to learn how to say no, and there are different connotations of no. My no was if I had a project or I was involved with something, and I had work to do, or there's X parts of my life that I wanted to entertain. And then somebody came to me and said, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do this? I would immediately drop what I was doing and take care of their needs. I would just, because of I needed to be loved. So I had to learn that saying no in certain situations was just an extension of honoring and valuing, loving myself, my energy, my time, my space. So it was a challenge for me to learn just simply to say no. And no, but how about I need to finish this? So a definition of a boundary would be, can you help me with this? Can you do that? Can you help me with this? And my answer would be, right now, no, I can't. But how about we do that tomorrow afternoon? And that is a boundary. That is saying no, honoring and valuing our commitments, our lives, what we have to do. And then setting the boundary that I can help you out, but I could do it tomorrow afternoon at, let me look at my calendar, at 3 o'clock. So it's not no, it's no, but. And that's how we learn how to set boundaries for ourselves, so we can contain our energy, so we can honor ourselves, honor and value ourselves, and then maintain a healthy relationship, because boundaries are neutral. Boundaries are not something that is formed out of anger or defense. People might misconstrue what a boundary is, because boundary is not a brick wall that you set in front of you. It's just a boundary to contain your energy, to honor and value you where you are. And boundaries are malleable within that, because then you have a line of communication in a relationship with someone, and they know where you are, honestly.
Solid opener, brother. Solid opener. Yep. A lot of food for thought there, my brother. And, you know, that power of no, which actually means yes in so many of our lives, man.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, brother, you hit it right on the head, you know, that time, space, and energy that we put into that interactions with other people, places, and things outside of self, and really honoring our own. You know, you brought up a couple of big ones, you know, particularly that affected me going through my life. And I was definitely that yes man, 100%, trying to really honor other people's, decisions, their choices over my own. I was literally going to things just to be with things. So I really didn't have role models to really give me an opportunity to be able to set boundaries within my life. You know, and I've seen that follow me through, and I became a people pleaser.
Mm-hmm.
And I would only say, up until the last few years, have I really honored my own space, time, and energy on being able to healthily create boundaries that not only other people respect me for, that I respect myself for, man.
Mm-hmm.
See, if we don't put up boundaries, my brothers and sisters, and they're rigid, people see them for what they are, and they fall down. And we can only take that responsibility for our own selves in how we created those boundaries in the first place. So, yeah, man, I'm looking to dive in deep with my brothers tonight, because this is on so many layers that we have to really help our brothers and sisters out there on this whole idea and this whole, you know, theme about boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was the yes man too, and the people pleaser. And but isn't it funny that you think you're doing it to be kind to others or nice to others, right? But then you end up holding this secret grudge.
Yeah, exactly. I was just thinking that.
Become passive aggressive. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and you start holding that score, you know, or at least I did, and it was like here I'm being nice, and now I'm like holding shit against you,
yeah,
because I was nice, and you know, not standing up for myself, and that was completely my fault.
Yeah.
And to that point, Josh, I just posted here. I want to welcome Gary to the show tonight. Gary, I'd love to know where you call home, but in the meantime, he says, say no to someone or something else and yes to yourself.
Exactly.
And that's That's a beautiful, strong statement there. It's one that I'm a big advocate of. I've said it many times, is that when I say no to somebody else, I'm actually saying yes to me. That's absolutely beautiful. What do you make of that, Josh? And what has it taken for you personally to learn how to have the courage to create boundaries in relationships? And boundaries aren't just between boyfriend and girlfriend or husband and wife or so on and so forth. It's between siblings. It's between children and moms and dads. It can even be at the work, at the office, in a career.
100%.
I was tested huge this last year on a show with a boss that I had, and I was challenged. It felt like daily, and it was for sure a monumental weekly that I was really struggling with it and struggling with him. And sorry, I'm catching a bit of echo.
Yeah, I can hear that.
I'm not hearing it on our end, but if you need to drop out or drop off, you can. We'll pick you back up.
All right. But no, it was really hard. And there were a couple of times that it was so epic and so massive that I was like, wow, this is really happening. I'm having to stand my ground again so firmly and say, no, this isn't right. I'm not going to put up with this. And literally have to say those words to my boss. Yeah. And I had to be so black and white and stand. And it was, and it just goes to show that, that was something that was hard for me for many, many years. And the universe comes back around and tests us on deeper levels and makes sure that we get it and we can move on to another lesson and nugget. And so I was tested hard last year, and I was pushed to the limit. And I think I've said on a past show, I didn't respond the first couple of times. I reacted, and then I got the lesson, and we went through it.
What was the ultimate lesson for you, Josh? What was your takeaway? Not while you were in it, but on the back end after you set that healthy boundary. What did you learn? What did you learn?
Well, yeah, because I was scared. In the moment, it was like, wow, I'm having to lay this down like harder than I've ever laid down a no, or this is. I think I yelled back at him and said, "This is horseshit. I'm not taking this, and this is on you." And I don't yell at people, and B, I don't like to lose my cool, but I had to in that moment, and. It felt great afterwards. Of course, I was like, wow, did I really just do that to my boss? But and I had my questions about it. But ultimately, when I left work that day, I said, you know what? He needed it.
Beautiful.
And I needed that.
Beautiful. I love that. I want to just acknowledge Christina Tucker coming in from our YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us this evening. She says, hi, Jay. Well, hi, Christina. Are you going to talk about people who have too many boundaries? And this is the second time this has come up today, just in passing, leading up to tonight's show. So what is that about? What does it mean? What do you think she means by having too many boundaries? Are those in this moment, are they boundaries, or is that more about someone who's trying to control a relationship or control outcomes of a relationship? Is there a difference between trying to control a relationship and setting too many boundaries?
I think if you have a number of boundaries, I read that when it popped up. It's like I'd have to ask Christina, when you're watching, Christina, what do you mean by too many boundaries? I mean, because that would be her interpretation of maybe something that's going on. Because we have many boundaries with many relationships, with different relationships, and in different areas of our lives. Like Jay just said, we have, with your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, there are boundaries. With your best friend, there are boundaries. With your, what you're doing for your career, there are boundaries. So there's a lot of different boundaries. And like I said, all boundaries are honoring and valuing and loving you. What she might mean is being in a relationship with someone who thinks they're setting boundaries, but are really removing or stepping back and really, saying, no, don't come closer. That's what she might mean. Or if somebody has too many boundaries in a relationship, then that person needs to watch Real Men Real Talk live.
We've got so many amazing comments coming in this evening. Jillian Bowie coming in from Scotland says, and for her, I always just want to take a moment to thank her because she's coming in. It's the middle of the night in Scotland. So thank you so much for spending the early morning hours with us here across the globe. She says too many boundaries or misplaced boundaries. Perhaps they're protectors of the inner child's wounds. And that's going deep. What do you think?
That's the answer. That's the, thanks, Jillian. I think that's the answer.
And again, it's really understanding what these boundaries are. I mean, we aren't literally looking at fences around a boundary like I talked about it in a video yesterday where I'm always trying to help people about owning their own home zone, meaning their body. We're not literally talking about the fence in our backyard, but I think when we use that metaphor and analogy of the house that we're currently living in, of those four walls, then you start to understand, and I was saying this, one of the games that we play over here, cricket in Australia, one of the rules is that when you hit a ball over the fence of someone else's fence into the next house, then you're out. You lose control to be in or batting to score any runs. So let's have a look at that for a metaphor. You've invaded or trespassed into someone else's property. So this is really just respect and really understanding, overstanding each other's boundaries from a get-go. Now, like that whole metaphor of, hitting the ball over the fence and being out, it doesn't exist so much out in the outside world unless we're strong and we've respected our own value boundaries and we've made sure that people know them. But there definitely can come a point where those boundaries, they probably are overlaying fears within people, like we've talked about, those, emotions that have been trapped or blocked from childhood, or not even having, like I said at the start of our show, that guidance or role models to help us outline boundaries within our lives emotionally, physically, mentally, and spiritually.
Beautiful. I want to welcome Carrie Crary back this week. Hope you are recovering well from a procedure you had last Friday morning, I believe. So it's good to see you back. I want to acknowledge, she says, yes, it can definitely be confused. What is a healthy versus non-healthy boundary? I do that with dating. Carrie, I'm going to invite you. Tell us more. What is it that you do with dating? Are you saying that you have a healthy boundary that you set in dating? What does that look like? Or you're acknowledging that you set unhealthy boundaries? Can you expand a little bit more for us on that? We'll come back to you there. I'd like to take a moment here to break down a part of boundaries that many of us miss if we haven't been taught how to set a healthy boundary. A healthy boundary is very different than a threat. So, for example, one of our viewers mentioned something about she set a boundary that she doesn't want her boyfriend to see his ex-girlfriend. Her boyfriend is his ex-girlfriend. And I guess where I want to go with that is that a healthy boundary always has an established consequence attached to the boundary. Meaning, if you do not respect my needs and my wishes, and this is what's going to happen. And if we don't follow through on the consequence, then it's just what's called an empty threat. And like a child, children test us. If you have raised or raising children, or you have exposure to children as an uncle, as an aunt, you know how children are. They test us. They're going to push us and test us to see if we're going to hold firm on our boundary. Now, for children, a boundary, in my day, they called it, getting punished. You got punished if you did something wrong. Now, you could set a boundary with someone having not done something wrong, but needing to avoid something from happening. But ultimately, a child pushes back many times and is going to test us to see if you're going to hold firm and follow through on the consequences. And when we as the adult don't, what does that child do? They know that they won and they got the power. They got control because you or I are not strong enough to hold firm. It's the same thing with adults. Most adults, when they are presented with a boundary, they're going to push back, especially if they're not accustomed to having set boundaries with you or other people in their life. They're going to push back. They're going to have temper tantrums. Some of them are going to have meltdowns. Like a child, they may even get on the floor and kick and scream or get in your face. But ultimately, a boundary is only healthy when there's a consequence. And a consequence has to be one that we are prepared to follow through on. If we're not, then don't put that consequence out there because you're going to be tested. Almost every time we will be tested. And I'm going to tell you guys, one of the first times I set a boundary was within my own inner circle of my family, extended and immediate. And the first 2 times I set boundaries, I don't know what it felt like for you guys, but for me, it was just this incredible internal feeling of just, I call it freedom. I was excited that for the first time in my life, I had the courage to stand up for myself. Evis, you spoke about that yesterday in your hike, your runabout. You talked about the D word, the big D word. I'm talking about doormat. Tell us more, Ev. What is that?
Beautiful, Joe. And, that comes back into this whole analogy, metaphor that I'm talking about of our home zone. Being that doormat, and I actually call an imaginary person Matt. If we're being our own home zone, we're being our own house, yet, we haven't set these boundaries, these guidelines within our own lives that gives our life fulfillment, that looks after our own well-being, that looks after our mental health. Like you're saying, with respect, without those consequences that you're talking about, people will know you as Matt, unconsciously and consciously. So you will be walked over, your feet will be wiped on over and over again until you hold up strong and stand up for your boundaries. So you'll have a welcome, Matt.
I love that.
You welcome in people now because you've got your own boundaries of your own home zone instead of just being the door mat. It's up to you whether you want to welcome in those people within your life.
Love that. That's beautiful, Ev. I'd much rather welcome Matt than close the door on Matt. Josh, what do you make of Jazz Star? Jazz, thank you for joining us this evening live. She says, my boundaries weren't created to offend you. They were created to honor me. There goes back to an earlier comment from one of our viewers that said, when I say no to you, I'm saying yes to me. But what do you make of that? Most people are offended or want to push back when they get asked to respect a boundary.
It's so beautiful, Jess. And it's funny. I was trying to think of who it was with and what the situation was. I can't remember, but I remember the first time being a young adult Because, you know, as young adults in early 20s, we're sort of floundering out in the world and figuring things out the hard way. And I remember the first time that somebody laid down like a super firm boundary. And at first I thought they were joking. And I think I even laughed, you know, and then I was sort of realized, whoa, they're serious. Okay. And then I was like, how do I respond to this or react to this? And I think I fumbled through like okay, yeah, I got it. And I remember sort of mildly being offended and thinking about it afterwards and going, you know, that was pretty rough or harsh that they said that. And it wasn't until later that I realized that it was like, oh, wow, they're just, you know, looking out for themselves. And, but yeah, I remember in my 20s, it was in college, that first super firm boundary I ever bumped into from somebody else. And it was like, whoa, what is this?
Yeah. I want to welcome Eureka Springs, Bill Ott, joining us this evening. Bill Ott, thank you for joining us on our YouTube channel, coming and live streaming as well. He asked us, please give boundary examples.
He must be reading my mind, because I was just thinking exactly that. You know, a lot of people, I used to do, you know, my groups in LA, and a woman in Malibu used to host a group that I was doing twice a month. And one night she looked at the group and she said, "What are boundaries?" She did not know what a boundary was. She had no idea what it was. It's huge. It's like it's a big spectrum of things. It's important to know the difference between boundaries and rules. Boundaries and rules, because boundaries set in a relationship eventually become malleable. Boundaries are malleable. They're not lines of demarcation or walls or rules. If you start setting rules, then you got to move into your, you know, duality and separation issues. And another reason to why watch Real Men, Real Talk live eventually. But some examples of boundaries are, you have a friend, and a friend starts to speak to you in a way that might offend you, that you might not like, or just doesn't resonate for you. And a simple boundary is, you know, hey, I really don't appreciate how you're speaking to me right now. I really need for you to speak to me in a more loving, kindful way, because that's what I need. That's a boundary. That's a very simple boundary that you're setting. And the important thing is that we're setting those boundaries for ourselves because of the way that we'd like to be treated. And it's not up to us how the other person takes the boundary, what their opinion is about it, or how they react to the boundary. That's their deal. So that's an example of a boundary. Another example of a boundary in my world, if I'm doing a photo shoot and I agree on what the photo shoot is and what we're doing, and I agree on the fee, and then all of a sudden during the photo shoot, they're pushing me to do more, asking me to do more. My boundary is, no, that's not what we agreed on. What we agreed on was this, and this. And if you want to go an extra hour, well, it's going to cost you this. That's another example in business of a boundary. So there's all different, and I'm sure, you know, we all have, it's such a wide spectrum of things, but those are two examples.
I love that, Jeff. I want to acknowledge J-Rod Concert Podcast, aka Jamie Rodriguez, says, when boundaries are strong, polarity, sexual included, have been on point. When I have become weak on them, my relationships have crumbled. And that brings me back to a memory. I was in rehab. I was still with my wife at the time. And we were seeing a counselor together in the rehab. And he said to us, he wasn't just a counselor, he was the owner. Okay, so he's been around, it wasn't his first rodeo. And he said to the two of us, if you don't learn how to create boundaries in your relationship, I guarantee you, you will be back here in 3 years or your marriage will be over within 5. Well, we left there looking at each other. Neither one of us knew how to safely set boundaries and practice them with each other. And neither one of us were willing to at that point. So the relationship continued to spiral downward. And eventually he was right. I stepped out about 4 years later. Couldn't do it anymore. It wasn't until I left the marriage that I finally had the courage to set my first boundary with her. We've got a lot of our viewers coming in on the female viewer side are chatting away here. I have to scroll back a pretty far way into this. I want to bring up, I'd asked Carrie to tell us more, and she said it's amazing the multiple things I have been accused of being because I set a boundary. I presume she's talking about in a dating circle, an experience. So as a woman, setting boundaries on a date, I guess our dates didn't take that too well in the moment, and push back in many different ways, I presume.
Well, once again, it's her boundary, and it's not how the other person's going to respond or react to it, because maybe they've heard it for the first time and said, "Wow, no woman has ever said that to me."
And it's not her responsibility to have to put up with their feelings and emotions that they have to react with.
And if a person can't honor your boundaries,
exactly,
and they don't even might not even know what a boundary is.
Exactly.
They might never have been told no before. In my world as a photographer, I could tell you no means no, and I know that. And I have been faced with, celebrities who I was supposed to do a photo shoot with, and they would come up and say, not now. And I'd want to do it now, but they say, no, not now. There's a boundary. Doesn't mean no, it means not now. As I said earlier, not now. We'll do it, but not now. And I have to go, okay, that's a boundary. You just set a boundary right there. It takes two to tango on boundaries. People set boundaries.
I just thought of one that comes up in a relationship is sometimes a partner or girlfriend would ask me to express my feelings, and if I haven't had any time to myself or time to reflect or really to articulate my feelings better, I'll just say, look, I need to think them through a little bit. I promise I'll come back to you and talk about them when I've given myself a moment. But right now I can't talk about it.
That's about
because it'll come out wrong, or I don't want to say anything out of a reactionary trait. But yeah, that's a boundary.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that, Josh. Piggybacking that, Keith says, I think, now this is an interesting statement here, and I'm going to expand upon it a little bit. I think that would be a good discussion before a relationship begins. A discussion and comprehension of each other's boundaries and reasons for them. That's a really interesting concept, because we step into relationships, all types of relationships, whether it be at home, again, at the office, friendships, with what we refer to as unwritten agreement. There's a lot of unwritten agreements as far as our role in a relationship. But what we typically don't do is establish what our boundaries are. And some of the boundaries, boundaries really should be, well, here it is. I almost went there. I'm going to retract that. I was going to almost say non-negotiable. But one of our viewers made a really great point tonight, which is that some boundaries need to be very rigid and inflexible, but other boundaries can be flexible, meaning we change, our needs change, how we feel changes. The relationship goes through ebbs and flows, highs and lows. And so boundaries can be flexible, but it's really up to you as the boundary setter to establish the change in the agreement of the boundary.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the way I'm saying it, it sounds like this is such a formal kind of negotiation that takes place, but
here's my sheet.
Here's the interview. Would you like to relate with me? Here's my boundaries.
what do you make of that, Ev? What Keith said about, have any of you guys, I'll open it up, whoever wants to jump in, ever tried establishing the parameters around a relationship up front as far as boundaries go? What's in, what's out, what's okay, what's not?
And we've talked about this in a previous relationship show that we've had as well. And this is really starting. I mean, this topic is just such a beautiful opening up of how we do start to form, partnerships within our lives. We sort of debunked that word relationships because, what do we have to keep recycling? We're starting to finally understand the fluid nature of what it is to be a human being. Now, I'm not saying to go out there and just relate with every person, out there, but this is honoring that I may not be the same person as I was yesterday.
Right.
Damn, I may not be the same person as I was this morning to what I am going to be tonight. This is who we are, my brothers and sisters. So we have to go on a deeper level, and with all of these beautiful questions and statements out there tonight, which I can't wait to have a look at, we're starting to open up the conversation of what it is to actually finally have that true relationship or partnership, as I call them, within our lives, based on connection, not attachment. We say it over and over and over again. So I think it's a great question, Keith. Beautiful question, brother.
Love that.
I don't think, for me personally, each relationship that we have is different. It's not like you have your little book and these are my boundaries, and then you hand it. Oh, hey, how you doing? Nice meeting you for the first time. Here are my boundaries. I don't think that's how it works. People are different. All people are different, and Ev just hit it on the head. It's not about attachments. It's about a connection. There's a difference between all these attachments that are so unhealthy that we have walking into a relationship. So here's my book, here are my boundaries. Oh, and by the way, along with those boundaries are all my attachments that I have to every single relationship before this one.
That sounds exhausting, Fasano.
Exactly.
Now would you like to date me?
Now would you like to hang out with me? I'm bringing all my attachments to every relationship that I have. And by the way, because of that, I'm handing you a book of boundaries.
Hey, Fasano, check out Abigail, what she says here. She just nailed it. Wow.
Exactly. There.
Set boundaries that are grounded in love, not anger and frustration.
Exactly.
And nobody can argue with that.
Nope.
Nobody can argue with any of those.
Nope.
Yeah.
I'm going to expand upon that. I think the love that she's referring to is the self-love. Set boundaries that are grounded in self-love.
Exactly.
Not anger and frustration. When we set a boundary and we're angry and we're frustrated, it's a lose-lose. There's no win-win, because we're coming from an emotional state rather than coming from a state of being.
Yeah.
State of being is when we are connected to ourselves, and in that moment we know what we need. The resistance comes in to set the healthy boundary when we are not comfortable with vulnerability.
Mhm.
I think vulnerability is a key component to setting a boundary. Because Josh, even in your experience, when you set the boundary with your boss on set, you had to be willing to, on some level, take a chance and be vulnerable with him because you hadn't set the boundary with him before. So it took a level of vulnerability and courage, not knowing what the outcome was going to be. Knowing that there's a possibility he may say, you know what, Ritcher, you're out of here. Pack your bags. I don't need your BS attitude. PG program. So no swearing for me here tonight, guys. Does that make sense? I mean, Ev, you're nodding your head. Yeah. Where does vulnerability play into us feeling safe to set boundaries with people?
Well, it's you truly opening up to your true essence, isn't it? It's you not hiding behind the boundary itself, but you are that welcoming mat. You are opening that door to your true nature of who you are.
Yeah.
So, as we go into this new earth, as we discuss in show after show after show, systems of old belief systems of the way that we relate with people, the way we relate with people, places, and things outside of self, as these become so malleable, we get this opportunity in being able to create through vulnerability. That is the true power on this planet right now. Vulnerability.
Vulnerability is just a feeling. It's not a state of being. I'm feeling vulnerable right now. It doesn't mean that you are vulnerable. Vulnerable is just a feeling that we have because we've expanded our heart space. We've opened our heart space to expand it and open it wider to move into the true essence and being of who we are. And then when we do that, we feel vulnerable. But we're not vulnerable. We're actually so much more deeply stronger in who we are being when we take that step, open our heart wider. It opens, it opens, and opens. We're moving into a powerfulness and strength of who we are. But the initial step in that is I'm feeling vulnerable right now. When that happens, then you can set a boundary.
I love that, Jeff. Piggybacking, Katrina May coming in from Vancouver Island, British Columbia. Welcome to the show tonight. Katrina, she says, I love this statement. I'm going to invite all of you to just hear what I say and then take a nice deep breath and hold it. Vulnerability is the most honest strength we will ever experience in this lifetime.
Katrina, can we use that as the tagline for the show?
I got a couple of ones here.
All of us have cried on this show.
Mary Kelly asked the question, if someone is struggling with self-love, if they're not quite there yet, now this is obviously a setup question. She says, why have boundaries?
Somebody who has no self-love wouldn't have boundaries.
Well, yeah, that's why my wife and I at that time, we were not able to.
Yeah.
We weren't even willing to test it. We just pushed back on it and said, well, it doesn't matter what we said. It's what we didn't do.
Yeah.
And that's what we needed. We needed boundaries in a relationship because there was we wore out a lot of doormats. Let me just say that. A lot of mats were worn out. Bill Ott says here, in a relationship, do you not bring it up until the other person crosses the boundary? Then you mention it or explain it. So that's kind of him, I think, really questioning what Jamie said, which is, do you just, where do you establish, when is the right time to establish it? What do you think, Josh? Do we come in with that boundaries established, or is that something different when you're establishing a relationship? Are boundaries more spontaneous?
Yeah, I feel like it's different for every scenario and every person because,
100%, brother.
yeah, every person's different. And So sometimes people go, do tend to be a little bit more forward, or kind of, might tend to run past some boundaries a little bit faster than other people and not recognize them. And so you do have to lay down a little bit more, sort of obvious boundaries, and maybe earlier in a relationship of that sort. And then there's other people that are really mellow, and you can kind of just say, hey, look, this bothered me here, and I'm not really comfortable with that. And if we could kind of, look out for it in the future. And they're like, oh yeah, cool, no problem. So it's different with everyone. And then I wanted also too, Jay, because I know you had an example too of having to set a firm boundary when it had real consequences. And like you said with my boss last year, there are times that boundaries can come at a cost, and we have to weigh that. And I got to the point where I was so tired of my boss beating down on me that I was willing to get fired. And that's what it took for me to stand my ground that day, was that I was finally, my self-love was like, I can't take this anymore. And so I'm willing to get fired and lose money for months and months and months, because I'm not going to take this anymore. And you, Jay, set a huge boundary with a very big name. And I'm still so impressed at the decision you made with that one.
Well, that's a funny one, Josh, because not everyone agrees with that decision I made.
And we're all different. Brother.
Yeah, man. It was beautiful, Jay.
Whether it be a big name or it be your ex-wife, or
exactly,
even learning how to set a boundary with a parent. I mean, as an adult, I believe I set my first healthy boundary with my own mom when I was about 56 years old. And it was such a beautiful experience for me. Because it gave me courage, like, okay, like I got over, your mom, the woman who births you, is your first female relationship. And part of what we do as a coach, when we teach our clients, when we share with them, in order for us to move forward in healthy relationships with women, the first one we have to heal is the first relationship we had with a woman, which is our own mom. And if we're able to do that, the potential for having a healthier relationship in all of your relationships with females, I believe, expands exponentially. And so for me, it was coming from love and kindness to myself. And my mom's, I know, watching right now, and she probably doesn't even remember what it was. And she may not even be aware of what it was, but it was big for me.
Yeah.
It was real big.
Yeah.
I remember it just felt so good.
Yeah.
And my relationship changed with her after that. It got healthier.
Yep.
So
I did, Jay, you just reminded me, I was 47 years old when I set my first boundary with my mother.
Beautiful.
And my father had just passed away. It was the day my father did pass away, and it was in their house. And I saw my father's body, being taken out, and I immediately just this emotion and I started to cry. My mother turns around and says, "Stop crying." And my entire childhood flashed right in front of my face. And this rush of anger the anger was palpable in me, that I said to my mother, listen, I'm going to go down to the store right now. Let me have the keys to the car. And I had to go out and breathe and really, really center myself, because the anger was so palpable. And I'm 47 years old, and my mother is yelling at a 47-year-old man to stop crying. And that was how my mother didn't want, was saying, don't feel your feelings. And that was a common occurrence through my entire life. And I had to find that a lot of strength and move through that intense, it was the intense anger of doing it. And so the next day, I was still angry and we had to go take care of things. And after we took care of some business, I said, Mom, I need to talk to you. And I just said, how come in that moment, when I started to have my feelings about my father, you looked at me and said, stop crying. And my mother said, in typical fashion, it was, I need you to be strong for me. And I looked at her and I said, so it's all about you, isn't it? I said, you have done that my entire life. And that is no longer acceptable to me.
Wow.
Wow, brother.
If you want me, quote unquote, to be strong, the way I'm strong is having my feelings and expressing myself. The reason why you're frightened to see my feelings is because of the feelings that come up in you that you don't want to deal with, Mom. So in the future, please don't do that. I would really appreciate it. And she did not even realize what she was doing.
There you
She
go.
never did it again after that. And thanks for opening that door, Jay, because that was my first real boundary with my mother after that. And the relationship shifted and changed after that.
Powerful, brother.
I
Wow.
want to take a moment here, really, just to honor you and thank you for sharing this intimate story with the world, really.
Yeah.
How does it feel in this moment to go back in that moment in time and share what you just did? What's coming up for you right now?
Boy, have I grown. I mean, that was I think about it, and it's not so much what's coming up for me now. What's coming up for me is how challenging that was for me to move out of little Jeff, looking at Mom thinking, oh, that's okay. You know, I had to step from the wounded little Jeff into the adult 47-year-old Jeff and become that and being that person in the moment of now. To do that, that was not easy. That was challenging, especially given the situation that my father passed away the day before.
Right.
So, but that was a very big step moving forward in my life. And it actually made setting boundaries, especially in my relationship with women, easier.
Powerful.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's so powerful. As we're approaching about 7 minutes from the hour, before we jump into our next segment of the show, what I do want to do is one of our viewers brought up another area of boundaries that we really didn't touch on, but Jillian did. She said, sometimes even as a parent, we fear setting boundaries with our children, especially as they move into becoming adults. This one really hit me hard in this moment because while I was practicing learning how to set boundaries as an adult for the first time in my life with my ex-wife and my mom, I had 3 sons in their 20s that were going through their own pain of my wife and I breaking up. And each one, I, at many different times, had to set boundaries with them. And it was so scary. I was so fearful. I was fearful of that if I set a boundary, I'll lose my child. And the truth is all three of my children, when I set boundaries with them over the past 5 years, on occasion have stepped out, some longer periods than others. But I do want to share one beautiful moment with you guys without getting into all the details. My youngest son shared some of his feelings about a decision, a choice that I had made in my relationship, my current relationship with Mary. And he basically told me how it was going to be. And I pushed back and I said, it's not going to be that way. Not here, not now, not today. I said, if you can't accept my fiance, the love of my life, with respect and honor her, then you're out. When you're ready to respect and honor her, which is a reflection of me, your dad, I'll be here for you. I always will be here for you. I love you. But I am not willing to have you call the shots in who I date, who I see, who I marry. I don't call the shots in your life. And there are many times where I question the choices that you may be making. But it's your life. This is my life. And we hung up. And I didn't hear from him for about 3 months. And at about that point, he reaches out to me and he says to me, it broke my heart. He said, Dad, I miss you. I need you in my life. And our relationship changed from that moment forward. It's healthier in many ways. I hadn't seen him for about 1.5 years. He came out, visited from New York, and he apologized to me. And he said, and I didn't mean those things I said, Dad. I'm really sorry. So even with our own children, my son at the time was maybe 24, 25 years old. He was about 25. So it's one of the hardest things to do is to set boundaries with the people you love and care. But what I learned is that if we don't set boundaries for ourselves, then we're giving that other person permission to not treat us with respect, to not respect us, to not honor us. Every relationship that we are in, there should be honor and respect. I don't care if it's at work, if it's between friends, parents, siblings, children, partners. If we lack honor and respect, then the only boundary to set is, thank you, I'm done, no thank you, I'm out. But that's what boundaries are about. And if someone is not willing to honor and respect your boundary, should they really be in your life in that moment?
Yeah.
So,
Wow, Jay.
Beautiful, brother. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. I'm just so grateful that I've said this before and I'll say it one more time. What we're talking about tonight in boundaries, it really is about showing up and growing up. It's showing up for yourself. And it's growing up to finally say, no mas, no more, no more, not here, not now, not today. I'm not advocating that we say it with such a strong, I'm saying it now just for you guys, for us. This is the empowerment period. This is the empowerment hour. That's what we do here in Real Men, Real Talk Live. We empower each other to show up and grow up. Knowing that, there's a consequence for the boundary. The consequence for us is that person may be out, but maybe that person needs to step out. They say sometimes you need to lose something to see what you lost or something to that effect. If they're supposed to be with you, they'll come back. And then they'll honor you and you can honor them and respect them in a way that wasn't possible before. So in this moment of, as we're approaching the hour, let's jump into musical and magical chairs. You guys know how this segment works. You each have 3 to 4 minutes, 5 if your name is Rothman or Fasano. Just saying, you know. But you got 4 or 5 minutes. You could either put a pretty bow on the show, share some tips, tricks, and tools to help those that are really kind of conflicted or struggling or fearful of boundaries, and or sharing some closing thoughts on what unfolded tonight in this quick hour. And so the way musical chairs works is last week, I know, Josh, you went first. I'm going to put Mr. Fasano, my ex-New Yorker, right next, New York, right on top.
There we go.
So you got 4 to 5 minutes.
Well, Jay, what I think from the entire conversation tonight, I think we gave some wonderful examples of a whole myriad of different types of boundaries. And there are very subtle boundaries. Boundaries are malleable. And in what Jay just shared, that was a firm boundary. That was like a firm boundary that Jay set, but it remained malleable. It's like, here's the boundary. It's firm, and this is where it is. But it wasn't, Jay didn't shut the door, lock it, and put up a wall and say, that's it. All boundaries are malleable no matter how firm and strong they are. And that's what boundaries really, really are. They're not brick walls. They're not, but they range from simple requests to something as firm as what Jay did. So these boundaries are very important. As I said when we began tonight, boundaries are just a simple reflection of how much you love, honor, and value yourself. But the thing that's just sticking in my head is the word no. And for me, the word no means no. And I'm speaking to a lot of the men out there right now. The word no means no, guys. It really means no. And to honor when someone says to you, no, this is not acceptable. If it's a female, no means no. And it's really, really important to understand that. If I say no, no means no, no matter how you feel about it. No is one of those firm boundaries. It's still malleable, quite possibly when the relationship develops, but no means no. And if you cross that line when someone says no, then you're in violation of being a human being. It is so important to keep that in mind when you hear the word no. I've heard it plenty of times. I've heard it plenty of times in my professional relationship. No, 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 which means it's nothing personal about you, but it is so important to keep that in mind. That is really, really coming up for me right now. It's so important to men who move into that place of this masculine, aggressive energy, and maybe you've never been told no before. So maybe it's the first time you hear it, but it means exactly what it means. It doesn't mean maybe. It doesn't mean you might or you can. No means no. And when you hear it, honor it. You might not like it, but honor it.
Love that. Jeff Fasano, bringing it home one more Friday night. Yeah, Mary Kelly said no is a complete sentence.
Yep.
And we don't always have to give an explanation why, unless we feel it's important. Otherwise, we can just say no, thank you. We've had so many beautiful comments, shares tonight from our viewers. I want to thank all of you that maybe are dropping in for the first time, checking out the show. Let us know what you think of it. If this is the first time watching tonight or even on replay, let us know what you think of our show and what you got out of it. If you heard something that has inspired you, given you some hope to make a shift or a change within a relationship in your own life, just drop it in to our comments. No judgment here. If anyone's going to be judged, it's going to be the four of us. And we show up ready to open our hearts and speak from our soul space, speak our truth with vulnerability. So, Josh, Ritcher, I'm inviting you in tonight. You're going to be right in the
All right. And I want to invite, if there's anybody out there who has any final questions or doesn't still understand boundaries, drop it in the comments now. For all of the silent ones out there that don't chime in, this is a safe place. Like Jay said, we show up with our hearts out, and we show up ready to cry and bare our souls to each other and to all of you. So this is a loving and no judgment place, and believe me, we've all been through the shit. So we are right there with you, and we understand. So, and love you all, everybody. What am I going to close with? I had a unique. I was debating whether to share this. I think I can share it in a way that doesn't really call anybody out. But I had a unique experience this last summer. We know I was shooting Shark Tank in the bubble, and I had a new person join my team, a very young, early 20s woman who was needing affection from men, and that need for attention. She wasn't. Oh, and here we are living in a bubble, and we are. She's part of my team, so as a department head, I have, now invited this person into our team, and she's a reflection of us. And especially because we're in a bubble, because there is no off hours, we're all hanging out with each other 24/7 and playing ping pong after work. And she's wearing some low cut things, and it became clear to me that she's vying for attention, and she needed that. And so it wasn't my place to say anything after hours, but she showed up for work one morning wearing something that wasn't appropriate for work. And this person, she was helping us do sanitize handouts for the sharks on Shark Tank. So she's going to be directly setting things on their table, and she was wearing a very low cut top that I could only imagine if she leaned over and set something down in front of Mark Cuban, he'd be able to see her breasts. And it was really, as Jeff, you brought up sort of the Me Too, the no is no. It's tough as a guy boss to have to call out a female employee on something and do it tactfully. And that was really hard for me that morning. And I toiled as she walked in and sat down. I toiled for the next 10 minutes and tore myself up over how I was going to do this. But I had to say something, and I had to that was my boundary. I built a department over 12 years that I'm the head of, and we have a very good reputation, both in Hollywood and on the show. And this was very inappropriate for my department, my team, and for the show, and reflected poorly on all of us. And so I had to set a very firm boundary with her and pull her aside and say, look, I'm sorry that I have to have this talk. But what you're wearing is inappropriate for work. And it reflects poorly on my department. And I have to ask you to go upstairs and put something else on. And I said, you're more than welcome to come back after you're done, but you can't continue wearing what you're wearing. And that was really hard as a guy. And especially as a sensitive, loving, caring guy, I knew what it was going to do to this poor young woman who is just starving for attention. She was just oozing it. I could feel it. So it killed me to have to pull her aside because I know that this conversation was going to crush her. But I had to do it, and it had to be done, and it had to be me, unfortunately. And so, yes. And I assured her later when she came back down, I said, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It was nothing against you. I hope you can understand. And I left it at that. And we never talked about it again, even though we spent several weeks together still in the bubble. But yeah, that was a tough one I had to go through this summer. And that just sort of, Jeff, you sort of spiked that one on the reverse of the Me Too. There's some weird stuff that now us guys have to do with female employees as well.
Love it, brother.
What did you learn from that, Josh? From that experience for you, what was your?
It's always safe to express what we need to express for ourselves, for our department, for others. And as long as we do it in a loving way, and I knew that I was going to hurt her, and I knew that was the exact opposite of what she wanted. But I did it with love, and you have to let it go at that point. You can't get caught up in how they feel.
You know, the cool thing, Josh, is that when you did that, you didn't shame her.
Exactly.
That's another wonderful way of speaking our truth and setting boundaries by being responsible for ourselves, being responsible for the work environment, whatever that is, because as we talk about it, the boundaries are all over the place. And it's so important that we're not shaming another person when setting a boundary. That's why that was so cool, Josh, because you didn't make it about you, and you did not shame and judge her. And that is so important because, hey, I'm sure we've gotten boundaries where we've been shamed and judged for what if somebody else thinks that we did or didn't do.
Jillian and a couple of the other ladies, Josh asked, how do you think she felt or took it?
She didn't talk to me the rest of the day and found little ways that we wouldn't ever be next to each other that day. But she slowly warmed up. And I think she saw from my reactions that I didn't make it a big deal, and that what was said, and that I continued, running our department in a loving, caring way towards everyone, and that it wasn't personal.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that story, Josh. In a leadership role, if any of our viewers, listeners have found themselves in a leadership role in business, it's part of the responsibility, unfortunately. Especially today with the country in the United States, at least, where we're very litigious. We like to file lawsuits. In my leadership role, I usually went to HR first to check to make sure that I wasn't going to get the company or myself into trouble, because I just didn't know what I was walking into as a leader when I would have to set a boundary similar to that. And before I put you in the hot seat, I do want to acknowledge, although we are in closing, Deb brought something up. Deb, thanks for coming in from Canada this evening. And I got to tell you, the sisterhood has showed up for you tonight, Deb. When it comes to sexual boundaries, by the time someone has said no, boundaries have already been crossed. Yes means yes. And if someone hasn't said yes, it's a no. I just want to take a moment here. Deb was had a show. She was my co-host for, I think, about a year or so on Real People, Real Stories, and just an absolutely beautiful, beautiful soul, beautiful woman who's got a story that many women have as well, where boundaries were crossed on dates. And so sisterhood has shown up for you tonight, as well as brotherhood. We're here for you too, Debs. We love you. We support you. And we honor you tonight. So thank you for joining us live. Ev, you're up, friend.
So powerful, my brothers and all my beautiful sisters out there. Wow. What another show, man. Can't wait to watch this one. 100%. Learned so much tonight, just listening to my brother's experiences and just sharing that story then, Jay. It really is a deep show, which all of us, could probably really listen to over and over again at a time like we have right now. But before I go in a little bit deep here on at Real Men Real Talk Live, as always, please, my brothers and sisters, and we know we see that you do it, but share this message out into the community because this topic of boundaries is so new to so many people that I still see out there in the collective. And for us to be able to share this message, we open up a new way of living, a new way of being here on the plane we call Earth. So please jump over on at YouTube. You can subscribe to us over there. Otherwise, keep sharing out the content. And as always, from the bottom of our hearts, we thank you. Now, I opened up the show and I talked a little bit about my personal experience with boundaries. As a young fella, like I said in my video yesterday on my personal profile, the only thing I ever knew about boundaries was me playing cricket, hitting either a 4 or hitting either a 6 into the boundary. And it's funny because I love to use this metaphor about cricket, and it's funny, and for a lot of you brothers and sisters on the other side of the pond, you may not know some of the rules within cricket, but you as the cricket bat holder have the power out on that crease. You have the potential to score runs, let's just say goals, or something within your life to win that game of cricket by hitting boundaries. Now, one of the really, I would say, important positions on the other team for catching you out, scoring those boundaries, is what we know as a square leg. Now, they're on the other team, but they field at square leg. Why? Because they're in an important position, or what we know the term as fielder, to save the boundaries that you hit. Square leg. What a name, eh? Square. Can I ask you, my brothers and sisters, have you been feeling like you've been knocked off your square lately? We all come down here into the space, into the physical plane we call Earth, to have this beautiful physical experience. We are all shaped within the square. When I see that square symbolically, I'm always thinking of the 4 elements of how we move through space, time, our energy, our reality down here on the physical plane. I think of air. I think of breath. I think of the communication. How are we communicating our boundaries? When I think of fire, the element, are you taking action on the boundaries you've been setting? Or you're still being passive within your life? When I think of earth, that 3rd element, I'm thinking of how grounded you are within your boundaries. And when I think of that last one, water, I always come back to it. I think of the emotions, the feelings that so many of us are still working on to gain that emotional intelligence. But for us to have firm boundaries and to be able to hold up our square, so we're not knocked off, just so it happens to be that mat shaped like a square. We're not knocked off and we're called the doormat, and we're able to welcome those we want in our life, those experiences that we want to really see out here on our physical experience here on Mother Earth. Then we have to really know our boundaries. We have to know our limits or our confinement within the square. So for me, when we start to know our own emotional well-being, the magic of boundaries, we can actually start respecting the emotions of others. You know, for me, when we take responsibility of our own boundaries that we set for our own life, you'll start to see the subtle changes within other people's behaviors around you. Now, whether that's your siblings, we've talked about our mum, our dad, that you've had to set firm boundaries. This is not because you don't love them. This is because you love yourself, man. We're talking about self-care by including these boundaries within our own lives that we can share with others also. So I'm going to close up, and like I said in yesterday's video, I talked about that young fella playing cricket in the backyard. There was significance because in backyard cricket here in Australia, you would be out if you hit the ball over the fence. Here, when you're out in a wide open space, you're a hero. You get a standing ovation. People applaud you for hitting the ball over the boundary. So my brothers and sisters, I'm going to ask you, are you holding your cricket bat? Are you holding your baseball bat? Are you holding your throne and becoming the one in this year, 2021? Peace, my brothers and sisters.
Beautiful, Ev.
Thanks, brother.
It's I tell you, I love the closing of the show, the closing remarks, because there's so much liquid gold that just gets dropped down into the universe. And as many of the viewers know, this is unscripted. We don't come in, we don't study in advance on a topic. We just show up. This word, this big word, this B word, boundaries, I believe was an integral part of saving my own life. I lived a boundaryless life. You see, for me, I think what predated that was I grew up in a home where my dad was a strict disciplinarian. And so as a young adult, of course, what do? Well, some follow in their dad's footsteps and others want to break free of that. I wanted to break free of that. I wanted to experience some freedom. At least that's the story I told myself. But I think at a deeper root than that was I was afraid that if I set boundaries with people, I'd lose them. They wouldn't like me. Maybe they wouldn't even love me. Maybe they'd fire me if it was on a job. But I went 54 years free soloing it. No boundaries. And by the time I awoke, I'd blown through a lot of doormats. And emotionally, I was worn out. This has been an emotional show for me. Not in a bad way, a beautiful way. This is what gratitude can feel like. When you know that you are risking losing a son, a friend, a potential parent, because it's time for you to teach people how to treat you. It's time for you to have the courage to say, I matter today. I matter. If you are alive and you are breathing, you matter. It's time for you to step in and step up for you. And if you have children and they're watching you, not set boundaries and be a doormat, you're teaching them that that behavior is acceptable from others in your circle. So I invite you this week to step in, honor yourself, set a boundary for yourself with a consequence, and then honor it. And watch how that relationship changes. At first, it may feel really bad and really rocky, like I shared earlier tonight. But in the end, my son came back. He said, Dad, I miss you. And he said something even more powerful than that. He said, I need you in my life. You're my dad. That's how it works, people. It takes courage. And with that, you guys are amazing. I love each one of you men in this studio with me tonight. You guys are just amazing. I had a quick thought about each one of you. A couple of days ago, I was out on a massive hike. And what just passed through me was, I just hope all three of you are safe and healthy in that moment. And it just was a thought. And I just let it go.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you, Jay.
You're welcome. Viewers, thank you for joining us tonight. We love you. We honor you. We respect you. And we hope for you that you got something of value out of tonight's episode on the power of no boundaries. With that, we'll catch you next Friday night, same channels, YouTube and Facebook, 6 p.m. on the West Coast, 9 p.m. back east. I love you guys. Have an awesome weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy. Peace out.